Hmm. So day 83 of 100 Days of Visibility. Yeah, right. Eventually I'll get this reminder in. So the Zoom isn't terribly important to switch to right away. Apparently I started at 2 minutes and 50 seconds into the video. Hmm. I have a very clear thing alive for me right now. But, let me start by speaking to where I am in this moment. My body has a type of ache right now throughout almost all of the musculature. It feels good, and it also feels kind of like a bruise. I did a strong workout this morning, and I feel a lot of alive in my chest, like excitement and fear and joy, and a kind of a fire that doesn't have a clear emotion attached to it. There's an attempt at a story to get attached to it. If I vent that into the mind, then something happens. I feel very clear. I've been clearer than this. But this is above my baseline. I'm enjoying it. A feeling of a kind of stability in my belly. See if we can get this to stop shaking. There we go. I have this kind of futuristic setup for my laptop, almost balanced on one of those ring lights. But the result is if I tap it, it just keeps wiggling and never stops. So part of the smile there is amusement at the embarrassment of that kind of setup. Like, oh, that's not professional. So the kind of workout that I do, it's primarily a meditation. It is physical exercise. I end up doing in the ballpark of 2 hours of a lot of working out. I don't have a lot of gym equipment. My gym equipment consists basically of 2 steel balls that are each about in the ballpark of 4 pounds. I got them because they're aesthetically nice. They're easy to hold in my hands. They aren't like barbells, so they look pretty okay actually. See if I can set them sitting there below my mirror most of the time. Hook that back there. But that's it for gym equipment. The rest is bringing my will into my body. Mechanically, what I'm doing is I'm pushing with imagined resistance. The imagining isn't exactly mechanical, but the purpose of imagining the resistance, like I'm pushing on something, is that the movement outward engages the musculature of that movement, but also the opposing muscles are providing an impression of resistance. So this kind of pressure, it does an amazing job for my body. I have a hypermobility, so like all of my joints kind of work backwards and wheel around, and so I need a lot of stability for my body to be really healthy and to avoid injury. And the main purpose of that isn't just mechanical exercise. That's actually a result. This is an example of a principle that I don't really have a name for, but a friend of mine, Deus Fortier, once... why is that? That should have been on silent. This principle that Deus had highlighted as the more subtle you go, the the more subtle phenomena are farther back in the causal chain. I don't think he said it that way, but that was the meaning I got from what he said. So the question of, well, can I exercise regularly? There's like when asked as a physical question, like, can I move my fingers? Yeah, there's nothing interfering with the movement of fingers. Uh, and saying, well, can I exercise every day or every other day? It sounds like it has the same type of question, like, oh yeah, I have the time for it. But in practice, the limitation for doing exercise is not, is it physically possible? The limitation is more, is the will present in a way that fits the ability to make the decision? This is one of the advantages of having something like a gym membership and a workout buddy who meets you at the gym every couple of days, uh, or paying for training where you just go and you train on Mondays and Thursdays. I don't mean to advocate this right now. It's it's actually controversial because we're in the middle of this pandemic. Um, Although, as an aside, there's something to be said about how making ourselves healthier is actually a really, really important part of dealing with all of this. Making ourselves physically healthier. That's like an actionable point in some sense of actionable. But many people don't have the choice to work out. The choice is farther back in the causal chain. It's more subtle. It has to do with how I feel and how my energy levels are and what kinds of stories I've been telling myself and how my life has been going. And all of that is an effect. It's actually an effect from a cause that's farther back. We talked about this before. There's a key point that if I look for, well, where do I actually have choice? There's only one specific, very tiny little point where I have even an impression of choice. The rest is all story or ignorance. Like when I think something like, oh, I should just reply to all those emails. Like the thought that thinks that is thinking in isolation of all of the factors that make it difficult for me to reply to them. Part of the issue is that if I keep up with all of my email correspondences and all of my messenger pings and all of the texts I get, then I find myself getting sucked into a kind of very left brain mechanical checking off all of the boxes mode, and it's hard for me to be creative. So there's actually a meaningful cost, and I feel the cost somatically and emotionally. And in terms of, am I producing things that bring me fulfillment in my life? Those two, in theory, shouldn't be at odds, but in practice they are. So I'm just telling myself, oh, I should just make sure I reply to the emails. Well, should I? I am slowly solving that particular one, but a lot of people struggle with it, which is why I mention it. So this business of tracking, well, where's the actual choice, is like such a beautiful, I find it so elegant, because the only thing that matters in terms of answering the question, what is good to do? What is good? And where should we apply our energies? What kinds of problems are worth solving? All of them come right back to this question of where do we actually have choice? Because there's no point in analyzing the things that we don't have any control over unless they connect to things that we do. I'm struck by the fact that I'm going down a different pathway than the one that is most alive for me, but this feels very closely connected. There's this challenge of if you take a basketball and you're going to try to shoot hoops, you throw. Once it's out of your fingers, once it's in midair, you have no control over whether it goes into the hoop or not. It's all mechanical. It doesn't matter how carefully you think about it, how much you go, come on, come on, come on! Like it's irrelevant. Because there's no causal connection that can actually affect it. You have no choice. over whether it goes into the hoop after it leaves your fingers. So noticing, well, I don't have any choice about that. It's worthwhile to be able to experience it because the experience gives me feedback on the parts that I can control. I can control how I focus when I am throwing the ball up into the point where it leaves my fingers. Now, I can do other things, but they won't affect the ball. So just being aware of that process, seeing what happens to the ball is important feedback, but it's only relevant if it connects directly to what I have choice over. Everything else is noise. So the question becomes, well, what do I actually have choice over? There's this impression of, well, I have choice over what angle I twist my hand at until I throw the ball. But in truth, that's not quite accurate either. That's not quite true. It's a little more true than being able to really focus to get the ball to do something else in midair as it's heading towards the hoop. Even if that's possible, it doesn't seem to be accessible for almost anybody in any relevant way. But even in this mode, there's like I've had a lot of experiences when I was training in parkour. We would do dive rolls of a specific kind. I had a challenge in that I've done a lot of dive rolls in martial arts, and there's something different to do with the legs. In Aikido, when we would dive through a kind of gap and then do a roll fall, it was important to tuck our legs so that one leg, not sure how to, so here are the two legs. It's important to tuck one leg behind the knee of the other, so that, or roughly in that area, so that there's a clear side to roll on, and so that the hips are angled in the right way. I won't go into the details of it, but that's a really important movement. The result is that it's very hard for me when I'm doing a dive roll not to cross my ankles. My body just does it. And it was really important in parkour not to do that, because in a variable terrain where I dive through something and then I'm having to improvise to recognize, well, what's on the other side and how do I navigate it? Well, if my ankles are crossed, I've now limited a lot of things I can do. Right? What if after they're crossed, I need the foot that's back to step forward? I now have a limitation that could, there's very little room for error. So it's actually important that I not cross my legs, and I couldn't keep my ankles from crossing. I even just made that the entire focus, and I could not do it. So now right now, I can cross my ankles and I can uncross them. I can cross my fingers and I can uncross them. I have a clear sense that, oh yeah, my intention has a very clear relationship with the environment. But there are some places where I tell myself stories about what I can or can't do that are just false. So where's the point of actual control? It seems to exist. And one thing that's very alive for me, again, this wasn't the central thing. I find it a little, it's important enough to me to talk about it that I may make this video a little longer than usual, because I want to, even just for my own sake, to speak about the thing that actually landed for me. Landed. Echoed is probably a better description. But I'll quickly finish this arc. It seems to me that the only thing that matters is what I can control and how it relates. I guess this is two-ish things, but what I can control and how it relates to the things, to anything, including the things that I can't directly control. Everything else is noise. And it turns out that I have choice and control over much, much, much less than I tend to think, which suggests something about the mind being a little crazy, the mind being disconnected from truth, being disconnected from reality. It's living in these fantasy worlds where it does have a lot of control. I can easily imagine not crossing my ankles while doing a dive roll. That's easy. But how much control do I have over taking that imagination and putting it into my body during a dive roll? Not much. I am pretty sure that I could train for a long time and that would solve it, but I would have to train for a long time. I don't have the control to actually do it right now. So this, now where exactly is that point of free will? I talked about this before. I think it's in what I intend. But I don't want to go into that arc anymore. That's, in some sense, this is context setting. And what I actually want to do is shift to a thing that's tenuous for me, very alive. So this morning, in doing my workout, car alarm. This morning in doing my workout, all of my focus is on this meditative process of bringing my will into relationship with my subtle and physical bodies. With the subtle body, this has to do with how I feel, what I'm thinking, how much sensation I'm aware of, how vitality is moving through me. How much energy do I have to engage in this, as opposed to, okay, now I need to do another 10 push-ups. Like, okay. As opposed to, I'm going to do another 10 push-ups. Where's that energy? How does it relate? But using my thoughts to try to control my energy, my vitality, my activity, is still working at a very mechanical level. It's a subtle mechanical level, but it's still mechanical. That's not where the point of choice is. That's not where real power is. And because of that, there's a tendency for the mind to create discomfort. The same way that if they're throwing the ball and then it's in midair, you go, come on, come on, come on, come on. That come on is adding pressure and it's adding discomfort. And it can create this weird feedback illusion that that is part of the process, but it really isn't. Just thump. Okay, that one worked. Great. Bam, bam. Okay, that didn't. Bam, bam. That one didn't. Okay. Oh, I noticed my ego getting in the way. Yeah. So, I'm pausing, slowing down because I keep feeling myself sliding off of the thing that I want to talk about. I'm not scared of talking to anyone about this. I was actually kind of excited about making a live stream of this, but this is not an elegant version of that live stream by any means. It just feels like, here's the point. Thump, thump. Embody it a little more fully. There. Okay. Okay, that feels better. And there's a piece that my mind has known for a long time that I glimpse and that I haven't been embodying as fully as I recognize is important. And as my mind models as important, I sometimes get those confused. Those two. Like, does my mind model it as important, and do I see that it's important? I get those confused a lot. I found myself looking over at um, the little artistic altar I've got going on here, and saying, no more me. when I am here, when I am using the voice instead of the mind, it's really clear that I have this mind that does this autopilot stuff. I can watch it. A lot of it is wonderful. A lot of it is painful. Right now, my parents went on a walk, and my mind started producing these fearful thoughts of, oh, what if they die in a car crash? They're not going to die in a car crash. And if they do, then they'll deal with that. But what's the thought doing? It's just creating pain. In other cases, I experience something of, like here, wanting to share about this glimmer. And my mind records the glimmer and keeps offering pieces. And that's really helpful. And then it goes on these tangents of, oh, here's this thing about free will and choice, which is important. But it's not the center of what I'm trying to attend to. It's actually a wonderful example of the whole thing. I come before all of the subtle and physical things. That's immensely clear. And when I look at the mind, I can see the mind producing these little icons, calling them me, Michael, having these ideas about how I'm going to feel good and how that part hurts and how, okay, I'm not going to do my inner work. And it does all of this noise. Now, the basic function of having an icon to represent me, that actually makes a lot of sense. In some sense, the mind has to do that. It cannot actually grasp me. It cannot contain me. Keep looking off to the left because it's almost like I'm imagining my mind right here. When I say no more me, I am recognizing how letting the mind run on autopilot, letting those icons, this is going to sound intellectual because and this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to work through this particular knot. The articulation still happens through some of the mind's autopilot subprograms. I could have told anybody this a week ago. I could have told anybody this yesterday. I don't feel like I'm seeing something new exactly. It's more like a different orientation to something I've always known. This always known is that the normal thing the mind does, sort of likes to do, for lack of a better term, gravitates towards, is using these icons, this little me. So it's almost like I'm playing a video game, and this is my avatar. And this is the little figure that represents me on the screen. The computer program knows how to relate to the figure, because the figure is part of the computer. When I trust the computer to do things that make sense based on my intentions by relating to the icon, there's a disconnect, which is that I am the user, I am not the icon. But if I just sort of take a hands-off approach and let the mind do its thing, it keeps running and it will produce these really weird loops, sort of like when you, if you play an MMORPG like World of Warcraft. Actually, I've never, but I've seen games that do things like this, where you'll set the figure to run some kind of basic programs of, if there's an enemy, go attack, or if there's an enemy, then make sure that you put up blocking spells or whatever. You put in a couple of commands and then you just let the character run on autopilot. And then the character just goes. But after a while, the character starts doing things that really don't make sense. And that the user could see don't make sense if the user pays attention. But if the user isn't paying attention, the program just runs. And you can end up with the figure getting very hurt, with running out of all your gold. You can do all kinds of things that the user may not care for because they're using that avatar. They're trying to enter the game through the avatar, and now the avatar is damaged. Or the avatar missed opportunities that the user would have liked to use. So there's something very analogous here. The person who usually talks is like an avatar. Because I can only speak through the avatar. In some sense, it's always the avatar speaking, but is it the avatar's autopilot? The autopilot is the ego. There's nothing wrong with the autopilot. It's actually really helpful. But to let the autopilot make decisions, including when the autopilot runs. I had a mental model of this for quite some time of going, okay, that doesn't make sense. What makes sense is anchoring beyond. But it was a mental model. Not just. It's like, oh, there's, as far as I can tell, there's something like I don't know, spiritual puberty. This is what Daniel Ingram calls it. There's a pivot point in spiritual awakening where there's a shift, a sort of point of no return in one's relating to spiritual insight. I passed that point several years ago. Yeah, there's no turning back. That's clear. But that doesn't mean I don't have an autopilot, and that doesn't mean the autopilot doesn't run on its own when I'm not paying attention. It's more like when I go, oh, right, I'm here. I am right here. It's like this radiance coming from beyond all the mechanisms. And one thing that has become clear in my experience is that there's something about embodying that recognition of the glitchy nature of the avatar's autopilot that I haven't been doing. I've been doing in bits and pieces, but I haven't decided to do it. Until this morning. I think so, in terms of something like the first half of this, where is free will? Free will comes from me. I choose. That choice comes from an absolute stillness, which is also me. So I notice throughout doing my workout, this, okay, push, and then in the way that I would pop into, it may be worth being careful of the language, but I'm just going to focus on the energetics here. I would experience a kind of pop into this focus on, am I doing it right? But the question, am I doing it right? It's a little bit like after throwing the ball, there's just come on, kind of thing. It doesn't make any sense. I don't have control over the ego that way. So the thing talking is the ego. I can see clearly what is true and what I can affect. So bringing in this, am I doing this right? Like, what is that thought for? I know the answer. But the real point is not, oh, I wonder what that thought is for. Here's my analysis. That's more mind. I'm more looking at the fact that I hadn't been looking at that. That so almost the whole point of this workout, this feel to me like there's this working into the body, working into the subtle body. It's actually coming from a in a lot of there's a very simple map that I really like of saying there are three, actually four levels, but it's the fourth is extra trippy to think about. But think of 1, 2, 3 levels where you have the causal level, the subtle level, and the physical level. These are in order of cause and effectness. The causal level is the farthest back point in subtlety you can go in order to affect things, for there to be a cause that has an effect. This is the ultimate cause within anything that has a sense of time to it. It's enormously subtle. It's subtler than subtle. Which is to say that it is a little harder to perceive and requires a level of stillness to perceive. It's a little harder to perceive than the way that music moves you. The feeling of, right now I'm looking at some sunlight glancing across the trees and a peak of blue sneaking out from between hazy clouds. And it impacts me. There's something touching about it. It's beautiful, and there are elements of it that are a little sad. I see some rain clouds off in the distance. There's it's not about judgment. This is just, oh, there's a certain quality to the feeling of it. The way that it actually makes my body vibrate. Which body? Yeah, it's ambiguous. What level am I feeling vibrations? Well, they're at physical locations in my body. So that's quite subtle. It's certainly more subtle than I see a tree outside. I see blue sky next to white clouds, and over there are darker clouds that are rain clouds. Right? That's very mechanical. So there's a mechanical level, a very physical level, and then there's this more subtle experience of almost like the meaning or the texture, the beauty. Beauty is not physical. Beauty it transmits physically, but it is not itself a physical perception. The way that beauty can come in and go. If I'm looking at something or hearing exquisite music, it's not just sound. So when talking about the causal level, I mean something that is subtler still. What could be subtler than that? Well, nothing can. And I'm doing a bit of wordplay there, sort of equivocating on the word nothing there. It's like saying nothing can sort of implies there isn't anything else that can, which is true, but there's also an implication that there is this almost thing that is nothing that can. Nothingness can. Nothingness can be more subtle. The space between me and the sky. I'm watching all of these little places where I think Perry Chase would talk about this as getting in the way, and that the important part is to get out of the way. Um, and the being spoken to there says, "Oh, I need to get out of the way." The one talking is the ego. It's this icon. There's something downright psychedelic about going down into experience to really see that icon, to watch that icon and watch what it's doing. In fact, I feel like if I had to redo this video, and I'm just going to make a 5-minute video on the point, I would highlight, oh, instead of going up into thought about this thing of the icon, I'm finding tremendous value in going down into watching the icon moment by moment by moment. And noticing, yeah, I'm not that. But going down, so it's not a thought. Excuse me, it's not a thought. It's a perception. I am not that. But am I doing it right? Oh, that's the icon. I'm doing a great job. That's the icon. Okay, I'm really letting go now. That's the icon. No more me. I am applying my will, which is from the causal realm, to remove identification with the icon, and to put it in its proper place. It is a tool. It is reminding me, and keeps reminding me, there's this fearful reaction, defense, saying, no, don't disidentify from me, because, I mean, what about the whole thing about experiencing everything as this? Like, I mean, why do you have to change who you are in order to be okay? Like, why can't there be satisfaction as this finite being? I mean, blah, 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 blah. And I think there's meat to that. But I've heard that prayer now. I don't need to keep repeating it. And I certainly don't need to repeat it by forgetting who I am and not being able to fulfill it. Today I'm a little more awake. I'm grateful for that.